Right? See numerical integration. Understand, you see, you're already aware of what is integration and how to integrate different functions. See, for example, one simple idea: when you are integrating a function like f of x between a and b, when you integrate this function between a and b, you will actually get some number. See, for example, if I integrate the function x square between 1 and 2, what happens? You see, when you integrate x square, we'll get normally x cube by 3, and then you will substitute these limits 1 to 2, right? So when you substitute the limits, you'll get them like this: 8 by 3 minus 1 by 3, which is 7 by 3. Some number you are getting. In a similar way, when you evaluate any definite integral, when you have integration with limits, we call it as a definite integral, isn't it? So for this definite integral, always, you will get the result as a number here. And what that number represents, actually, you must know this. So this number, whatever you'll get here, it represents area under this curve. Right? See, for example, if you just draw the diagram of this, let us say if this is the graph of f of x, right? And then you are integrating this function between two values, let us say a and b. Let us say if this is the line x is equals to a, and this is the line x is equals to b. Now see, if this function f of x is positive, if this function f of x is positive for all values of x between a and b, it means geometrically, you see, for all values of x in between a and b, the graph of f of x is completely above the x-axis, right? When it is completely positive for all values of x between a and b, then when you evaluate this definite integral, it calculates area between this original function f of x and this x-axis. You will get this area. Let's see, we have done problems on this already during the last, probably last semester. Now see, here, already how to evaluate the area under curve in simple, right? By evaluating this definite integral, you can do this. Now again, why numerical integration is necessary now? What might be the problem here, right? See, while evaluating these definite integral, we'll consider several conditions like, this function f of x must be continuous, and then it must be well defined, or else you see, this function must be integrable, right? So when you have all those things, somehow you can easily integrate it. But see, when the function is non-integrable, when it is too complex, when it is non-integrable in simple. For example, you see, if you take this function e to the power of minus x square, if you want to integrate this between, let us say, 1 and 2, right? See, how can you calculate this? When you have only e to the power of x, yes, certainly you can evaluate it. But when you have e to the power of minus x square, you see, no method, whatever we have learned so far, can solve this, right? So with the analytical methods, whatever we discussed till now, we cannot actually evaluate this definite integral. So for functions of this kind, when the integrand is of this kind, the methods, whatever we have learned so far, are absolutely useless. Now, so in those cases, when the function is too complex, when the function is non-integrable, we need to evaluate, if still we need to evaluate that, we can use what you call numerical integration, right? So as we discussed, when we start numerical methods are the techniques which approximate the mathematical procedures, analytical procedures. In a similar way, when you take this numerical integration approximates area under the curve, right? See, when you evaluate this definite integral, you're actually getting area, right? Even in this case also, though the function is non-integrable, still it gives you some number for a general idea, because you have some limits here. Definitely you'll get some number here, and that number is area under this curve, correct? So since the usual methods are not applicable here, we can use numerical integration. Still, even by using numerical integration, if you evaluate that, you will get a number only. That number actually represents again area under the curve. But if you get this number under this method, numerical integration, we say this number is an approximation to the what you call this area under the curve, right? So as in other numerical methods, numerical integration also approximates what you call areas under the curve, right? So that's a basic idea here. And now, while evaluating area under the curve, you see, if you recall what you have done some time ago, probably when you were in intermediate, or at least in the last semester, you have discussed this. While evaluating integrations, like you see, if you are given an integration of this kind, for example, you see, if you take this example, I'm taking this one. If you draw the diagram of x square, you see, y is equal to x square, it looks like this. It's a parabola. right? Now see, let me just take it little bigger. Now see, it will be something like this actually, parabola, but I'm taking only the upper half because you are taking the values of x between only 1 and 2, right? So I'm taking it like this. Now see, you are trying to evaluate integration between, let us say, a and b. In general, I'm writing this. Now see, if you recall the basic idea of evaluating definite integrals, what you have done actually, when you are given an interval of this kind, you will initially divide this interval into n subintervals, right? More or less, we'll take these n subintervals with equal width, right? We'll divide this actual interval a comma b into n subintervals of equal width. So when you divide that interval into n subintervals with that to equal width, what may be that equal width that we need to identify? So when you are trying to divide this interval into n subinterval, as how we did here, you see, when you are given 1 comma 2, this interval, and if you want to divide this into 5 parts, we'll first calculate the length of this interval, which is 2 minus 1, and then we divide that length by number of subintervals you require, right? Now, so in general, if that is the case, now see, in general, to divide this interval a comma b into n subintervals, we'll get width of each subinterval as this, you see. Now, first of all, length of the interval, which is b minus a, divided by, you see, how many intervals you are expecting? N subintervals. So divide this by n, right? See, this is width of each subinterval. And in numerical methods, we always denote that width by, you see, h, right? Understand now what we are doing? You are given actually this interval a comma b, and now you are dividing this into n subintervals, n equal subintervals of width h. Okay. Now see one more thing. To divide this in numerical methods, I'm just giving you one more notation here. Whatever the initial value you are considering, you see, the interval is a to b, you know, the initial value here is a. For convenience, now I'll take this initial point as some x naught. Because you see, I'm dividing that into n subintervals. No, I need to give a name to each part of that interval, right? So for convenience, to get some similarity also, I'm just defining this initial point of the interval as x naught. Then what may be our next interval? You see, guess this way. If this is your point next in this interval, right? See, you are dividing this into n intervals now. Let us say if this is your second point. I mean, this is one interval whose width is h units. You are dividing this into n intervals with the width of each interval as h. Okay. Now, if this you take it as x naught, what may be this point? That must be at a distance of h units from x, right? That's how you see the next point will be x naught plus h, right? See why I am taking this as x naught plus h, because width of this interval, you see, now my next interval is this x naught comma x naught plus h. This is my first sub interval in this interval. In the original interval a comma b, when I divide this into n sub intervals, the first sub interval is this x naught comma x naught plus h. Why I'll get x naught initially? In fact, it is the initial point only, but for my convenience now I take it as x naught. Now, when I take this first point as x naught, right, the initial point as x naught, then the end point here must be at a distance of h units. Why h units? Because the interval width we considered is h, right? That's how you see now, if you calculate the width of or else length of this interval, it is x naught plus h minus x naught, like how we did b minus a here. It is x naught plus h minus x naught, which is equals to a. To get width of this interval, we are taking the next point, I mean the last point in this interval as x naught plus h, right? But now see, for convenience, I'll take this x naught plus h as some x1, right? So now understand, the first interval, first subinterval of our actual interval is this x naught comma x naught plus h. But now see, for convenience, I'm taking this x naught plus h as x1. Now, can you expect what may be our next interval? So here, if you, here if you are ending this, what may be our next interval?
x2.
Means what may be the first point in this interval?
X naught plus h.
Yeah, when it is x naught plus h, we can also write it as x1 now, as we considered here, right? It is x1, it starts at x1 and ends at the next point, you know, it is again, it should be at a distance of h units. So it should be like x1 plus h. So if I take now that x1 plus h as x2, right now this is x1 comma x2. And then hence you can understand our next interval will be, it starts at
x2
x2. And again, the last point is in this
2
interval
plus
will
h.
be x2 plus h. So then similarly, if you take again that x plus h, x2 plus h as some x3, you can continue this procedure, right? You can write all n subintervals in this way. But I'm just interested in what may be our last interval in this way. Just to have a look at this, in the case of first interval, though we are writing it as x0 plus h, you can understand it is actually x0 comma x1. And here it is x1 comma x2. Here it is x2 comma x3, right? And now look at these endpoints in each subinterval. In the first interval, first subinterval, the last point is x comma x1. In the second subinterval, last point is x2, and in the third subinterval, last point is x3. In a similar way, what may be the last point in this nth interval, nth subinterval? Guess it is in first subinterval, we got the last point as x1. In the second subinterval, we got the last point as x2. In the third subinterval, we got the last point as x3. In a very similar way, in the nth subinterval, see, you're getting the same thing, right? Third x3, second x2, first x1. In a similar way, when it is an nth interval, in this xn will be the last point, right? And see, remember, though you're writing it as xn, it will be its previous point plus h. Like you see, what is x3 actually? X3 is x2 plus h. Or if you take x2, x2 is actually x1 plus h. That's how, in a similar way, when it is xn, it is its previous point, which is xn minus 1 plus h. So that here you can expect the last point, the first point in this last interval is xn minus 1. That's how you see. If you write all intervals like this, this is your nth interval. And most importantly, remember, you're actually dividing this interval a comma b into n subintervals. In that process, you got the first point in the first subinterval as x0, and in fact that x0 is nothing but a. In a similar way, if you look at the last point in the last subinterval, xn, this xn must be equals to b, the last point of your actual interval, right? Like this, you need to divide your actual interval into n subintervals. In fact, you have done this earlier also, isn't it? Now see, when you divide this into n subintervals, you see here you got some x0, then you got some x1, then let us say you got some x2, and so on. You see, you got some last points here, and so on. Here this is xn minus 1, and the last one here is xn. Now, after dividing the actual interval into n subintervals, right? N subintervals, recall what you have done earlier. In each subinterval, if you take this x0 comma x1, this is the actual area which you need to consider here. But instead of considering the actual interval, what you have done, you see, you have taken a rectangle which fits into this. And here in this case, we take one more rectangle here like this. And here we take a rectangle like this. Always, you see, instead of considering the actual interval, we approximate that actual area by a rectangle here. And then by calculating the areas of all these rectangles, we approximate the area under this curve by sum of areas of these rectangles, right? This is what we have done while discussing this definite integral. Of course, we won't take only, n subintervals, but we extend it. We just extend the idea of n subintervals into infinity number of subintervals. And that's how we got this integration and all, right? Now, the basic idea is anyway to divide that into n number of subintervals and to approximate the area by different means. Now, see, this is your question. In numerical integration also, we are going to do a similar thing. And see here in this numerical integration, we are going to discuss two techniques. One is using trapezoidal rule. Probably some of you have discussed this already in intermediate. And the second thing we discuss is Simpson's rule. Let me just give you one idea behind these two rules, and then we'll move on to the actual story. See, in our regular things, we have actually considered, when we discuss integration for the first time, we have approximated original area by areas of rectangles. But now see in trapezoidal rule, what we do? There are actually two ideas. I'll just give you one after the other. In trapezoidal rule, instead of considering rectangles here, they will consider what you call trapeziums. Right? Instead of considering a horizontal line here, which leads to a rectangle, they will consider what you call a slanted line, which gives you a trapezium, something like this. Right? Sometimes it may not be possible. Right? So by considering trapeziums in each subinterval, they will approximate the area under this curve by sum of areas of trapeziums. Right? This is the basic idea mathematically, in one sense. And there is one more idea here, you see, geometrically speaking. To find out the areas under this curve, they will actually divide this into n subintervals. But see, in each subinterval, see, this is your original graph. Right? See, this is your original graph. But see what they'll do here. Within each subinterval, instead of considering the original function, they will approximate, this original function by a straight line. Right? They will approximate the original function by a straight line. In fact, you see this straight line, whatever they consider, it may be sometimes it may move out of this also. That's how, of course, it leads to a trapezium. That's the basic idea. But the basic geometrical idea here is we are approximating the original graph by a straight line, which leads to what you call trapezoidal rule. And in the Simpson's rule, you see the same thing. See, we do this in each subinterval. In each subinterval, we approximate the original graph by a straight line, which is a linear curve. But see, when it comes to Simpson's rule, instead of considering this original function, they will approximate this origin in each subinterval again. In each subinterval, they'll approximate the original function by a parabola, a second degree curve. In each subinterval, they will approximate the original function by a parabola, second degree curve. That's how, it leads to what you call Simpson's rule. Geometrically, this is what happens in simple. But I'm not getting into the derivation because derivation leads a lot of other stories. So anyway, we are not discussing all those things. So I'll just give you one simple formula and then let's do a few problems on them. And in simple, you see what you have done so far. This is a question given to you. You are simply evaluating an integration of this kind, that to a definite integral, and you are dividing this actual interval into n subintervals like this. When you divide that into n subintervals, you see what you'll get. Now see, you are dividing the actual interval a comma b into n subintervals of equal width. And see that equal width, whatever you are calculating here, right? We are using this formula, h is equals to b minus a divided by n. Now this h, whatever we are considering here, we actually call it as step size. Right? Understand that carefully. Step size is width of each subinterval. Right? Now see, when you divide that into different number of subintervals, look at this, what you got everywhere. You have divided the interval AB into n subintervals like this, x0 to x1, x1 to x2, and so on. So that we got totally n plus 1 data points. Right? Within this interval, to get n subintervals, we got, n plus 1 data points starting from x0 to xn. Now, corresponding to, after getting these data points, we need to calculate function values at each of them. Already, you are given a function in the question itself. So using that function, we can evaluate the function values at each of these data points. Now see, I'm just naming them. If you calculate the function value at x0, I'm just writing it as f0. Then function value at x1, I'm writing it as f1. Then you see function value at x2, it is f2 and so on. Right? Fn represents function value at xn. Now see, using this numerical data, we are going to evaluate what you call the definite integral. And you see, as I told you already, we have two formulae. One is trapezoidal rule and the second one is what you call Simpson's rule. Already I have written these two formulae here. You can just go through them. Trapezoidal rule. See, this is your actual question. Though it is integration from a to b fx dx, as how we considered here. See, we have considered x0 as a and xn as b. For convenience, I'm writing it as from x0 to xn. The same question, but we are replacing a and b by x0 and xn. So when you integrate this particular integral, you see, you can actually evaluate it by this formula. H by 2 times, H is this step size. And then you see sum of first and last function values. We only substitute the function values here. Look at them. Sum of first and last plus 2 times remaining all function values. Right? Sum of first and last plus 2 times remaining all function values. You can just understand this very easily. When you add areas of all these trapeziums, the only thing which don't repeat is this initial function value and the last function value. Remaining all repeats 2 times. Enduku? You can understand. You see, the first interval is x0, x1, and the next interval is x1, x2. So if you calculate the function, if you calculate the areas, you will get the area of x1, I mean the function value at x1 in the first interval, and the function value at x1 even in the second interval also. So function values at x1 will be repeated 2 times, not only at x1, even at x2, x3, and up to the last but one point. For all these things, when you calculate the areas of trapeziums, we'll get the function values 2 times. That's why you see here, the function values at non-end points of this interval. At the end points, we are adding them only once. But for the remaining all points, calculating the function value for 2 times. Right? So that's how you see here what you got. Sum of all these things into h divided by 2. This gives you area of this particular integral. I mean, the value of this course approximation to area under the curve between these points. In a similar way, see, you can use even Simpson's rule also. In fact, the question is same to evaluate this integral. But here, we are approximating the function by some parabolas. So when you use them, here you will get them like this. You see, h by 3 times sum of end points. First one plus last one. Plus 4 times, you see, look at all these suffixes here. 4 times odd ordinates, right? Function values with odd suffixes. Then plus 2 times function values with even suffixes, right? F2, F4, and so on, right? So now to evaluate any definite integral in these two methods, the first step what we need to do is to create a data of this kind. We need to divide the actual interval into n subintervals, and then we need to calculate the function values at each of those points. And then we can use these formulae to calculate, to evaluate that particular definite integral. But one condition, please remember here, because you are approximating the original function by a second degree curve parabola while deriving Simpson's rule, number of subintervals, when we use Simpson's rule, number of subintervals must be even, right? Because you see that is always 2 times the original thing, because you're approximating every time by a quadratic curve. That's how, number of intervals must be even. So anyway, we don't use these two methods in different problems. For each problem, we use, both the methods to find out the integral value. And of course, we can compare them. So since we use both the methods for the same problem, I suggest you to take only even number of subintervals every time. Whatever may be the problem, depending on the interval, try to take either 6 subintervals or 8 subintervals, 10 subintervals, and so on, as you like. But I suggest you to take only even subintervals, most conveniently. Actually, for trapezoidal rule, there is no such condition. You may take any number of subintervals, no problem. But for Simpson's rule, here is a condition. You are allowed to take only even number of subintervals, right? So keeping all these ideas in mind, let's move on to a question. Right. Look at this question. Now we are evaluating this integration from 0 to 6, 1 by 1 plus x dx using both trapezoidal as well as Simpson's rule. And we need to even compare the result with its actual value, right? Let us see how can we find out all these things. And now see, whatever the integrand you are given here, I'm taking it as f of x initially. So you are given that as 1 by 1 plus x here. So I'm taking this as f of x. Fine. Now see, as how we are considering every time, we need to divide this into some number of intervals. See, number of intervals is not mentioned in the question. So since the interval is 0 to 6, length of this actual interval is 6 units, 6 minus 0, right? Since the length of this actual interval is 6 units, let us try to divide that into at least 6 in subintervals, so that we'll get results properly. You can also divide that into 12 subintervals, 18 subintervals, it's all up to you. But here in this case, I'm trying to divide this into 6 subintervals, right? So I'm taking n is equals to 6. So if n is 6, what may be the step size? We need to see that. Step size is equal to length of the interval b minus a, b minus a means here it is 6 minus 0. So 6 minus 0 divided by total number of subintervals we are expecting, it is also 6. So we'll get this as h is equals to 1, right? So now see, we got number of subintervals and even step size. Now see, looking at this particular interval, now the question is this: what is integration of x0 to xn? See, I'm taking these points as x0 and xn. As already as how we considered, this is f of x dx. So we need to now evaluate this integral. Now to evaluate that, you see, what may be x0, that is the initial point of your actual interval, which is 0. Now, can you expect what may be x1? We need to prepare a data now, right? So I'm just writing all those values. What may be x1? It is x0 plus h.
Plus h.
Right? So in x0 is 0 and h is 1, you see. That's how we'll get this as 1. Then if you write x2, it is x1 plus h. So x1 we got it as already 1 and h is also 1. You see, 1 plus 1. We'll get this as 2. Then x3, it is x2 plus h, which is 3. x4, x3 plus h, which is 4. x5, x5 plus h, which is 5. And xn, which is x, something went wrong here. This is x4, right? See, x5 plus h, which is 6. As see, we have already discussed about this. The last point, whatever you'll get here, last point, whatever you'll get here. Here I'm getting the last point as x6, right? That should be equal to what you call this upper limit of the integral. And see, I got the upper limit here, which is 6, right? Now, therefore, you see, for a convenient, for idea, I'm just writing this. What are the subintervals here? The first subinterval is 0, 1. Then the second subinterval is 1, 2. Then 2, 3. Then 3, 4, 4, 5, and then finally 5, 6. So like this, we have divided this actual interval into 6 subintervals. So we got 7 points totally, x0 to x6. In your data, you have 7 points, but the intervals are 6 only. Then see, now at each of these data points, we need to calculate the function values, right? Now, so for that, I'm just writing it like this. You see, I'm just writing all the data points here, one after the other. The first data point is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. As we have already considered, this is x0, this is x1, x2, x3. Then this is x4. This is x5, and lastly, this is x6. Now, at each of these points, let us calculate the function values. Now, try to use your calculator. You can also help me if you have a calculator. Create a function in your calculator with this function definition. You are given the function as 1 by 1 plus x, you see. Create a function in your calculator with this name, 1 by 1 plus, you can use alpha x, right? Now, using that calc button, calculate the function values at different x values. So when you substitute x is equals to 0, we'll get 1 by 1 plus 0, you see, 1 by 1, which is the function value is also 1. Now, when you substitute x is equals to 1, we'll get 1 by 1 plus 1, 1 by 2. 1 by 2 means it is 0.2. I'm sorry, 0.5. Then when you substitute x is equals to 2, you will get 1 by 3 actually. As we know, 1 by 3 means 0.3333. Then when you substitute x is equal to 3, we'll get it as function as 1 by 4. When it is 1 by 4, as we know, the function value is 0.25. Now, when you substitute x is equals to 4, it is 1 by 4. Sorry, 1 by 5. When it is 1 by 5, we'll get it as 0.2. And then see, when you substitute x is equals to 5, see, we'll get it as 1 by 6, correct? So when it is 1 by 6, you can write it in decimals actually here, 0.1667. I'm rounding off this fourth digit. Then when you substitute x is equals to 6, right? I'm just using my calculator. We'll get this as 0.1667. 14285 is there. I'm rounding off this at the fourth digit. So I'm just taking it as 29. So these are the function values you will get at different points. So for convenience, I'm taking this as F0, this is F1, this is F2, and this is F3, F4, F5, and here is the F6. Now I'm just trying to use what you call a formula for trapezoidal rule. Let me evaluate the integral using trapezoidal rule first. Now I hope you remember the trapezoidal rule formula which I gave you in the previous slide. Now I'm just rewriting that formula for this particular data, right? See, if you recall this trapezoidal rule, here we have written this for x0 to xn, right? So when it is xn, we will use this idea. But now corresponding to that xn here, we have only x6. x6 is itself is the last point in this interval. So therefore, integration from x0 to x6. I mean here n is equal to 6 kada andukani. x0 to x6 fx dx is equals to, I'm just using that formula, which is h by 2 times, I'm just writing the formula like this, you see, sum of first and last function value. See, first one is f0, last one is f6 here. So I've used these two already here, f0 plus f6 plus 2 times remaining all. You see, already the first and last are used here, you see. So that if you write the remaining values, they are f1 plus f2 plus f3 plus f4 and f5. Right now, let us just substitute everything into this. H, it is 1 by 2 times, first and last, 1 plus 0.1429 plus 2 times, remaining values, 0.5 plus 0.3333 plus 0.25 plus 0.2 plus 0.1667. Right? So this ends the problem here. Now, if you can simplify this, you can use your calculator to simplify this. I'm just using my calculator. So be careful while adding all these values because there is some division also. Plus 2 times 0.5 plus 0.3333 plus 0.25 plus 0.2 plus 0.1667 divided by 2. So see, I got it as 2.02145 is there. So I'm just taking it as 15 here. So this is the value of that definite integral when we use what you call trapezoidal rule. Now in a similar way, I'll use what you call Simpson's rule to find out this. So if you recall that Simpson's rule here, wait, I'll come back to you. Right, see now I'm just rewriting this formula to calculate Simpson's, this integral value for Simpson's rule. x0 to x6 fx dx. Now see, this is your formula now. H by 3 times first and last value. You see, if you recall these values here, it is from f0 to f6. So the first one is f0 and last one is f6. You see, that's how you see here. H by 3 times f0 plus f6 plus, I hope you remember this, we'll have actually this as the formula, 4 times f with odd suffixes. So we'll get them like this, you see, 4 times. We have f1, f3, f5. But see, f7 is not there in the formula, right? I mean, in the data, f7 is not there. So we'll only stop up to here, plus 2 times. We need to take function values with even suffixes. So they are f2 plus f4 plus f6. No, we should not write because already it is the end point, right? It was already used here. So we'll only take up to f4. Right, so this is your formula now. Let me substitute everything into this. H is 1 by 3 here, then f0 plus f6. 1 plus, see how much is f0, f6? It is 0.1429. 0.1429 plus 4 times f1, f3, f5. Let us substitute one after the other. F1, it is 0.5 plus f3 is 0.25. Then f5 is 0.1667. Then what you have here, it is 2 times f2 plus f4. See how much it is. F2 is 0.43 and f4 is 0.2. Right now, see, if I simplify this, I'm again using my calculator anyway. 1 plus 0.1429 plus 4 times 0.5 plus 0.25 plus 0.1667 plus then 2 times 0.3333 plus zero point 0.2 and all this divided by 3. So see here I got this as 1.95876 something is there. So I'm rounding off this to the next value here. So using Simpson's rule, we got this definite integral value as 1.9588. See, when we use trapezoidal rule, we got it as 2 point something here, and here it is 1.95 only. So there is a clear difference between the function values. So in the question, if you look at this, you're also asked to compare these two values with its actual value. So what do you mean by actual value here? See, this integral can be evaluated analytically. We have an analytical procedure to evaluate this integral, isn't it? So let us use that to find out its exact integral value. I mean the exact area. So let me calculate that here. Actual value. See, the question is this: integration from 0 to 6, 1 by 1 plus x dx. I hope you remember when we integrate 1 by x, it's nothing but log x,
Log.
right? Yes. In a similar way, when you have f dash divided by f, then its
Log
integration
mod.
is, yeah, log mod f of x. Right? See, exactly have the same here, you know. If you take 1 plus x as f of x, if you just assume 1 plus x as f of x, its derivative is there in the numerator. So if you use this idea, when we integrate this, you see, we'll get it as log of 1 plus x. And the limits here are from 0 to x. Right? Then see, if you substitute the limits, we'll get them like this. You see, for upper limit, first we'll substitute the upper limit, right? So when you take x is equals to 6, we'll get log of 1 plus 6, which is 7. Minus log of, when you now take x is equals to 0, it becomes only log 1. But we know already log 1 is 0, right? So we'll get it as only log 7. Now from your calculator, you can see how much is log 7. Log 7. See, I got it as 1.9459 from my calculator. Right? So this is your exact answer actually. This is exactly solution of that particular integral or else area under that particular curve between 0 and 6. But see here, when you use either of these two numerical techniques, Simpson's rule or trapezoidal rule, clearly you can see, at least, you know, Simpson's rule is a little, nearer to the actual value. But see, when you look at trapezoidal rule, it is too far from the actual solution, right? That's how I understand Simpson's rule is, it has better convergence compared to what you call this trapezoidal rule. I mean, Simpson's rule give you better approximation compared to trapezoidal rule. And here in this case, actually, let me just add one sentence here. You are actually considered only 6 subintervals, right? When you consider more number of subintervals, for example, if you take 12 subintervals, you will certainly get a more better approximation. In, of course, both the methods, whether it is in trapezoidal or Simpson's. But of course, if you try to take more subintervals and if you continue with Simpson's rule, you will get a value which is very, very nearer to the actual solution. Right? So anyway, that's how actually you can integrate this function using these two methods.